They are people out there who are so cruel, so ruthless, so egregious, so sadistic that they commit crimes that warrant capital punishment. They commit crimes that are worthy of the death penalty. One of them that comes to mind is Danny Rowling. Danny Rowling was a mass murderer who I talked about in my last video. He went to college dorms and murdered students. He would rape women, stab them to death. In one of his murderous actions, he was spying on a woman. He was spying on a woman that he wanted to rape and murder, and he was hearing her phone conversation in which she talked about how there are these murders that are taking place because this guy, Danny Rowling, was murdering people at this time. And so it was definitely the main talk of the college. Everybody was scared. People were understandably terrified. And this girl was talking about how she wanted her boyfriend, Manuel, that was his name, to be with her because she did not want to be alone. And later on, deep in the evening, or deep into the night, maybe it was like 1 a.m. or something, Danny Rowling showed up to this woman's dorm. Her boyfriend, Manuel, was sleeping. He snuck inside, plunged a knife into her boyfriend's chest. He wakes up. He tries to fight back. Rowling stabs this guy to death, and then goes to the woman and rapes her. It's horrific. Rapes her, basically sexually tortures her, and stabs her to death. And this was how Danny Rowling killed his victims. He would rape them, and then he would stab them to death. And then he leaves the house. He forgot something. I think he forgot his weapon or his knife, or his wallet or something. I forgot what he left in the dorm. He comes back, and then he decides to behead this woman, sticks her head on top of the television. Yeah. Really, really horrific. Really horrific. And there's so much of this that happens in the United States. Like, America is for some reason, it's a country that has so many of these types of stories. There have been tons of serial killers in the United States. Just go look up any sort of list of serial killers by country. You'll see America always with the biggest list. And then I think the second biggest is probably Australia, England. The Anglo world has a lot of this sort of thing. I don't know entirely why, but it just does. But Robert Blecker, who was studying and he was really doing his own independent investigation on death row, and he wanted to show the world that they are people out there who deserve the death penalty. And they are people out there who commit crimes that are so evil that they deserve capital punishment. And he wanted to see for himself what death row is like. How is life on death row? Because there were people, and there are still people today, who are against the death penalty. And they'll say, oh, death row, it's so horrible. The conditions in there are awful. They're awful. It's like 150 degrees in their rooms in the summer. They don't even have air conditioning. Oh my God. So awful. So Blecker wanted to see, is death row really that bad? Or is it just basically a big apartment room for mass murderers, a big apartment complex for mass murderers? So he went to Florida State Prison, and he saw numerous murderers. And he went to a number of other prisons as well. And during his investigation of death row, he eventually came across Danny Rowling. And he saw Danny Rowling in his cell, a nice little pillow around his neck, a reading lamp above him, and he was just reclining, reposing very comfortably on his cell bed, reading a book. This is the life that you live if you are a mass murderer. That's not punishment. It's not punishment. And then he came across a number of death row inmates playing softball. Not only were they playing softball, but death row inmates were also playing ping pong, a bunch of board games, Monopoly. Oh, they play cards. And Blecker came across one death row inmate by the name of David Keene. I believe this was in Florida State Prison. David Keene raped an 8-year-old girl before strangling her to death with a shoestring. And Blecker interviewed this guy, and he asked him, "What's life for you on death row?" And he's like, "Well, I get up, I play games with my friends, fellow inmates, and you have to have a good time. You have to cope. You have to learn how to cope in here. So you got to live your life. So we joke around, we play games, we relax, we play board games, softball, whatever." And this was David Keene's life in death row, playing softball, playing Monopoly, playing cards or whatever with his buddies. That's the life that someone who raped and murdered an 8-year-old girl was living. Okay? Raping and murdering an 8-year-old girl, you get a cell for yourself. And here's the thing, is that people who are in prison for lesser crimes, I don't know, assault, robbery or whatever, and they're in prison for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, those are the ones who live in the most they're the ones who live in the most difficult atmospheres in prison. They're the ones who are with the other criminals. They're the ones who are getting into fights with other criminals. They're the ones who are in danger of getting attacked by other criminals. They are in the most dangerous parts of the prison system. Those guys. The ones who do lesser crimes. The guys who are doing 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And those are the ones who are living in the most brutal conditions, most brutal environments in prison. The guys who do the worst of the worst crimes, the Dahmers, the Kempers, the Bundys, the Keens, the Rowlings, the Dempses, all these types of people, they get a cell for themselves. And I remember listening to an interview with Edmund Kemper, and he talked about how, my cell is my home. And here in death row, we don't call our cells. We call them our homes. These are our homes. They're our houses. We don't say your cell. We say your house. Well, how nice. What an amazing community, right? What an amazing sense of community that these monsters have. It's not punishment. They're getting interviews. Oh, there's a video you can see of Bundy talking with the guy. I forgot his name. Who was the guy who ran, what was it called? Something of the Family? Focus on the Family. The guy from Focus on the Family interviewed Bundy before he got executed. Oh, and he talked about how he found Jesus or whatever. When people talk about how they found Jesus, do you know how I know when they're full of shit? Believe me, I know, because my father was a terrorist at one point in time, and he found Christ. And so I know when someone has truly found Christ. I have a sense of it, because I've met people who truly found Christ, and I've also met people who were full of shit. The people who really found Christ, they get into all sorts of intricacies of the Bible. They can quote to you Bible verses. They can tell you their favorite Bible verses. They can give you interpretations. Now, you could have a guy who's very manipulative and who's a very good liar and who has read enough of the Bible to quote verses, and they can trick you. But truly, while that is true, while that is a reality, or, it's a reality, I would say that somebody who is faking it is not going to give you Bible verses. So when you hear someone actually giving you Bible verses and interpretations, there is more of a prospect, or there's more of a chance that guy is not lying to you, as opposed to someone who doesn't give you any Bible verses, but they're going to give you the generic narrative that they think people want to hear. So, for example, you hear Ted Bundy, and he's talking about how, Jesus helped him, or Jesus is giving him strength to go through the reality of him being executed, because Bundy eventually was executed. And I'm like, I strength, courage to be executed. You deserve to be executed. And Ted Bundy did not want to get executed. That's the thing. Same thing with Edmund Kemper, the guy who was a cannibal, who murdered random women that he would pick up who were, who would pick up, he would pick them up when they were hitchhiking. He'd pick up these random women who were hitchhiking. Okay. He'd pick up random hitchhikers, he'd rape them, kill them, cannibalize them, sodomize the bodies, the whole damn thing. Oh, and Kemper found the Lord while in prison. And he even talked about how he wanted to be a missionary to other people. But Kemper doesn't quote the Bible. You don't hear Kemper giving his favorite verses. He just talks about how Christ gave him peace inside, gives him peace inside. But you don't hear these people saying, I deserve freaking death. I don't hear that from them. I don't hear it. Same thing with Dahmer. Oh, Dahmer found Jesus. You couldn't find Jesus after murdering a bunch of innocent people. You couldn't find Jesus after your first victim. You only found him when you were put in prison for the rest of your life. And all of a sudden he finds Jesus. And again, I listened to his interview, his testimony interview. I don't hear him quoting the Bible. I don't hear him quoting anything of substance. It's just, oh yeah, I found the Lord. I remember years ago, I mean like back in the early 2000s, there was this guy that I met. His name was, I think his name was Mark Gabriel. He was from Egypt, and he claimed to have been a radical Islamic imam, and he was getting some people listening to him. He was trying to make a name for himself, and I remember meeting Gabriel at an Applebee's in, I want to say what year was this? Man, this was a long ass time ago. This maybe was 2002, and I remember my father asking him, "Oh, Mark, or Gabriel, do you know, what's your favorite verse? What's your this? Who was Cain and Abel? Who was, just basic questions, basic questions that require very basic answers. Couldn't answer them." And my dad told him right in his face, "You're full of shit." I was there. So that gave me the understanding of how of things to look for, red flags to look for when detecting these BS artists. And I remember years ago seeing what was his name? The Green Prince. He called himself son of Hamas. What was his name? Hassan Yusuf, Musab Hassan Yusuf, I think his name was. This guy is another bullshit artist. Oh yeah, I found Jesus and this and that and all this stuff. And then before you know it, he's Mr. Hippie liberal, looking like he just got off of some nightclub in San Diego. Oh yeah, he found the Lord and blah 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 blah. He goes from being a guy who, oh yeah, Allah is a psycho god, and I found Jesus and I found the Lord, and then all of a sudden he becomes some kind of universalist. And I remember hearing him at some Jewish event, or no, it wasn't a Jewish event actually. It was a evangelical Protestant event, I think in Norway, and he said something like, "We are Israel. Everything is Israel. Beauty is Israel. We are all Israel."
I transcended religions and politics long time ago. All of us are Israel. Existence is Israel. Humanity is Israel.
Israel gave us so much, gave us Steven Spielberg. And I'm like, this is some of the cringiest stuff I've ever heard in my life. This guy obviously did not prepare for his speech. He's just going off, just saying whatever comes up in his brain. Yeah. But he's another bullshit artist. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention the fact that this son of Hamas guy was talking for the Arabic branch of the 700 Club. And he said in the Arabic branch of the 700 Club that if you know that someone's about to blow up a bus in a terrorist attack, obviously, then you should not report it to the authorities. Oh, really? So now we're promoting murder. So from being, a radical follower of Jesus, ex-Muslim, he began to tell people on a Christian network that if they know for a fact that someone's about to do a terrorist attack in a bus in Israel to kill Jews, you shouldn't report it to the authorities. That is bullshit. Not only is bullshit, it's pure evil is what it is. You're literally promoting murder. at this point. So another bullshit artist. But I remember listening to the son of Hamas years ago, and he would say, "Oh, I love the verse in the Bible that tells us to love everybody." This is not a specific. This is a conventional narrative that everyone on earth has heard. Everybody has heard that God wants us to love everybody. Everyone has heard that Jesus gives you love and peace. Like everyone's heard the pie in the sky, hippy dippy Christianity. Everyone's heard this stuff, right? God loves you. Everybody's heard that. Everybody's heard that. I mean, it's not all nonsense. God does love everybody. Well, I think mostly everybody. There's some people I don't think God loves. But I mean, we've all heard that God loves everybody, right? That's why it's completely pointless to you always see these people at the the football games and the baseball games. You always see that one guy in the crowd with a sign that says John 3:16. Like, has that ever helped anybody? I have no idea. Or like all the hippies who would go to the Billy Graham crusades. I mean, how many of those people who found Jesus with Billy Graham, how many of those people really stuck with it? I don't know. They were like hippies taking LSD one week, and then what? They went to a Billy Graham crusade and then found Jesus, and then, I don't know, they probably went back to LSD consumption a week later, and they started worshiping Gandhi. I don't know. I'm being humorous at this point. But there's just so much garbage out there. So much garbage. And, today, I mean, really early in the morning, I saw a video. I didn't know this existed. I spent a number of hours reading about Charlie Manson and the Manson family. And I learned there was things in there that I already knew about, but I found this very long article on Charlie Manson. It was on Murderpedia, this is the first time I ever read an article on that site. There's a lot of pedias out there. There's a Wikipedia, and then there's an Investopedia. I forgot. It's basically all about investing and the economy. And then now there's Murderpedia, and it's been on for a long time, but this is the first time I read an article on this site. But their article on Charlie Manson is almost like a little book. I mean, it's super long. I spent a couple of hours reading through it. I read through most of it, and I will say, there were things in there that I knew already, but there were things in there that I did not know. But it talks about Manson's muscle. His last name was Watson. His nickname was Tex because he was from Texas and he had a big, thick Texas drawl to him. And Manson called him Tex. So Tex Watson was his muscle. And if you read about the La Bianca murders, in which Manson told his followers to murder this couple, the La Bianca couple, and Manson went to the property. He went to the property and he told Tex Watson to get in there. And the reason why Manson attended the call for this murder was because he didn't like exactly how they did the Sharon Tate massacre in the house of Sharon Tate and her husband Roman Polanski, who wasn't there at the time. I guess it was too bloody for him or something, but he said, I'm gonna, he said, go to this couple's house, La Bianca's, and kill them, but I'm gonna be there so I can show you how to do it, right? How it's done. So Charlie Manson goes there. He goes in there with his female followers, and there's Tex Watson. They get into the house. Manson tells Tex to tie them up, so they tied him up, and they stabbed Mr. and Mrs. La Bianca to death. There was what was it? I forget their first names, but they stabbed them to death, and it was Leno La Bianca was the husband, and then the wife, I don't remember her name. But they stabbed him to death, and man, if you read about Tex Watson, I mean, this guy was an absolute monster. Not only did he stab Mr. and Mrs. La Bianca to death, but he also killed a number of the people inside the Sharon Tate's house. And there were two people that I read about who managed to run out of the house, but they didn't escape the property. They ran out of the house. They managed to get to the front lawn, but they couldn't get past the front lawn because Tex Watson stabbed them to death. And there were two different moments of the massacre where somebody got out of the house, ran to the lawn, and then I think one of the girls attacked him. attack this person, and then Tex Watson comes in and stabs the person to death. And then there was a lady who managed to run out of the house. She goes to the lawn, and then Tex Watson stabs her a whole bunch of times and killed her. Tex Watson was an absolute monster. And I looked up Tex Watson on YouTube to see if there was any videos of this guy. So I'm like, I want to see how this guy looks like, because I want to see the eyes. I want to see the demeanor. I want to see how a psychopath talks, because by seeing that, you get this awareness that, man, these people, they can talk like normal people. And many times, you're talking to somebody and they may sound normal. They may sound like regular folk, but damn, they're pure evil. But you can see it in the eyes. There's a lot of people out there who are really good at masquerading themselves, and they can talk normally, and they can joke around, and they can be real charming and funny and humorous, kind of like Edmund Kemper or Danny Rowling. If you listen to Danny Rowling talking, he has that real, low tone Southern voice. I said in one of my prior videos that he had a creepy Bayou accent. My apologies to the person from Louisiana who got a little bit offended by that, because Rowling wasn't from Louisiana. I think he was from Tennessee. Was he? I think he was from Tennessee. Whatever. But he had that. If you watch, there's a video of Danny Rowling talking to somebody, and he actually tells the lady, "Bless your heart." Literally freaking says this.
Bless your heart. Yes.
And everybody from the South will tell you, when a Southerner says, "Bless your heart," what he really is trying to tell you is that he hates your freaking guts, but he's probably nice about it. Bless your heart. And in Danny Rowling's case, he probably was fantasizing about murdering the woman that he was talking to in this hearing that he did. He did some kind of testimony hearing. But Danny Rowling, I'm pretty certain that if an average person were to see Danny Rowling, didn't know that he was a murderer, didn't know that he was a rapist, just heard the Texas or the Southern accent and his Southern politeness. Oh, bless your heart. The average person probably would think that this guy is completely harmless, but you can see it in the eyes. You can see it in the eyes. One moment, guys. Dang it, this cat wants to get out. You can see it in the eyes. You see this in the Catholic Church too. You'll see priests who, they say all the right lingo. Hail Mary, full of grace, and our Father who art in heaven, and glory be to the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. They do the sign of the cross perfectly. They give out the communion. They do everything right. They will exhibit all of the trappings of Catholicism. But you can see it in the eyes. There's evil there. And I've seen it so many times. You can see the evil. As the saying goes, the eyes are the window of the soul. And I truly believe that. You can see it in the eyes. And when you look at Danny Rowling, you see evil. You can see his eyes are just tense like that. When you look at a lot of these Catholic priests, you can see the evil in their eyes. And I've seen people who work for the Vatican who look just as evil as any serial killer, even though they may not have killed anybody, at least not that we know of. They have that look. They have it. I've seen it. But Danny Rowling, after raping and murdering women, decapitating a woman, doing all these horrific things, sleeping on some bed with a nice little pillow around his neck, reading a book with a lamp over him smiling and laughing, looking at the camera, that's not justice. David Keene raping an 8-year-old girl, strangling her to death, and then playing softball, that's not justice. But then you'll say, well, Ted, they're in death row. They're going to be in death row for a while. Blah, who cares? Well, excuse me. What is the average, the average type of death that death row inmates go through? It's not the electric chair. It's not execution. The average death row inmate dies of natural causes because they're in there for so long. So they're basically living in a resort for death row inmates. They're living in an apartment complex. And they're not getting executed. Why? Because of the appellate court and their lawyers constantly appealing their sentence. That's what happens. So they just appeal it and appeal it, appeal it, appeal it, and they just keep living their lives because they keep on appealing it. That's what Daryl Holton did. That's what Daryl Holton did. He kept appealing it. His lawyers kept appealing it. Eventually, he was executed, but his lawyers kept doing it. Or they have a parole hearing. Look at Ted Bundy. I mean, Ted Bundy tried to escape. He didn't want to die. These people didn't want to die. And so the fact that most death row inmates don't get executed, or they just die from cancer or heart disease or cardiovascular disease or whatever, that tells me that they don't want to die. And the suicide rates in death row are extremely low. They don't want to die. They find a new life in death row. They find a new life. They have fun playing cards, softball, and they're just going to live the rest of their lives there. Oh, and when ministers or when missionaries go to prison to preach the gospel to people, the part of the prison that they want to preach in the most is death row. That's the most popular place for prison missionaries. They don't want to preach to the cholo. They don't want to preach to the guy who was selling meth. They don't want to preach to the weed seller or whatever, or the guy who did a stick up. They want to preach to the Edmund Kempers. That's what they want to do. I guess that's more exciting for them. Oh, I guess it's like a challenge, kind of like the girl who can get the criminal to fall in love with her. Oh, he killed all these women, but he didn't kill me. Oh, I got the most wickedest person in the prison to finally find Jesus. Look how good I am. That's what that is. Look, I'm so proud of myself. Yeah. It's a bunch of nonsense. That's what it is. I'm not saying that a serial killer can't find Jesus. But what I am saying is that even if they find the Lord, they still need justice. The man who was on the cross next to Christ, the thief who was on the cross, he said, I deserve what I'm getting. And he still died. The man who was not repentant, the thief who was not repentant, he wanted off that cross, even though he deserved what he was getting. That's the reality. That is the reality. But you see so much sickness and so much of a lack of accountability, especially on the internet. But you see this in regular society, but because I'm on the internet a lot, because that's part of my job, you see it all the time. For example, in the Lebanese Civil War, there was a guy who called himself Abu Arz, Abu Arz, I think he called himself, which means the father of the cedar. He was a Lebanese nationalist, hence the term father of the cedar, because the cedar tree is the symbol of Lebanon. His real name was Etienne Sakr. And Etienne Sakr was a Lebanese Maronite nationalist who helped to lead the war against the Palestinians in the Lebanese Civil War. And he said that it is the duty for every Lebanese person to murder a Palestinian. He said this. He would teach this to his followers. And his followers were some of the most gruesome some of the most egregious of the Lebanese nationalists during the war, because not only would they kill Palestinians, but they would take the victims of the ears of their victims, different body parts of their victims, and they would strap them onto their belts. Yeah, this actually would happen as trophies. But they are people, Lebanese people, or even some Christian people who aren't even Lebanese, who want you to think that these Lebanese people they were good patriotic fighters. Yes, fighting for Christianity. But keeping ears on your belt as a trophy, what the hell does that have to do with Christianity? If you look at the Sabra and Shatila massacre, how there was mass rapes that went on. There were rapes that were going on. These people were fighting for Christianity, but they were raping. Right? You can't rape for Christianity. It just doesn't work that way. And I asked a question to people. I would say, if these people were fighting for Christianity, what the hell does rape have to do with Christianity? Still, no one has answered this question because nobody wants to look at the reality, because there is a running away from the truth of what people love or what people have idealized. People make an image of something in their brain that doesn't exist, but that mental image becomes their reality. So in this case, their reality is that these Falungist fighters, these Kataib fighters, were fighting for God or whatever, fighting for Christianity and all these things. That's an image that they have made in their mind. When the reality is that they weren't fighting for Christianity, they were fighting for Lebanese nationalism, this crazy idea that they were pure Phoenicians and they were proud Phoenicians, and controlling territory. But there's no accountability. One thing I've noticed online, and this is really disturbing, and I didn't know that this existed until a few years ago when I started looking at Sticks, Hex, and Hammers videos. There are a lot of people online who defend Charles Manson. It's crazy, I know, but they'll defend Charles Manson. And man, there are people who say Charles Manson's innocent. Well, why do you think he's innocent? Because he personally didn't kill anybody. Well, I mean, he was in the La Bianca house when they murdered Mr. and Mrs. La Bianca, so he was definitely a part of that murder. But they don't want to ever engage with the fact that Charles Manson had obviously tremendous power over his followers. When you have tremendous power over people, psychologically, spiritually, when you have tremendous influence over people, you have responsibility. That is responsibility. Just like when you're a leader of a country, you are responsible for your words. Your words are very effective, and you have power because you have influence. And so, for example, Adolf Hitler telling his people to go to war with Poland, or we need to go to war with Poland, and everybody agrees with Hitler. Why? Because he's their leader. Or the Young Turks telling people to murder Armenians, murder Greeks, murder Assyrians. The Young Turks were guilty of mass murder, even though they may not have made a direct order in paper. They did nonetheless make orders to different regional leaders who would tell their people to go out and kill Armenians. That's responsibility. But you have Turkish nationalists who make the same type of arguments that people who love Charles Manson do. It's amazing that the weird internet cult of Manson thinks no differently than Turkish nationalists or people who deny the Holocaust. Well, the Ottoman government never made a direct order, but they did. They made secret orders to regional leaders. Or Hitler never made a single order to kill any Jews, but when you actually look at his rhetoric and you look at the fact that there was definitely an agenda that was being advanced by the Third Reich to massacre people of various ethnicities, you can see most definitely Hitler has responsibility. It's just like it's a no-brainer. But they're making it out like Charles Manson, and they'll say, I've heard people say, "Oh yeah, but even if Charles Manson told his followers to kill people, he's still not responsible." Well, if you have tremendous influence over your cult, if you're a cult leader, you have power. Yes, you have responsibility. Yes, these people are going to listen to your every word. Absolutely, you have responsibility. But it's amazing how these people all think the same because there's no accountability. There's no sense of accountability. When you look at, Tex Watson, the guy who was stabbing people for the Manson family cult, stabbed the La Biancas, stabbed people in the Sharon Tate property. Freaking Tex Watson did an interview with the 700 Club. I couldn't believe it. I looked him up on YouTube, and there he is in the 700 Club. Oh yeah, he was just he talked about how, oh, I was a naive young man from Texas. I was a naive Texas boy. That's how he described himself. As if to say, well, I wasn't that responsible. Manson really just had all this influence on me. Well, Manson did have influence on you, obviously, but you still have responsibility because you still made a choice. So people just don't have accountability. That's the thing. And that's what we learn from that story of the two thieves who were side by side with Christ in his crucifixion on Mount Golgotha. The penitent thief says, I deserve punishment. I deserve what I'm getting. But the wicked one says, no, get me off this. Appeal. I want to appeal my sentence. He wanted to appeal his sins while he was on the cross. Get me off this thing. Yeah, no justice. Without accountability, you have no justice. That's the bottom line. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.